Have you ever heard of a man who tried to start a civil war all by himself? A man whose actions were so extreme, so radical, that even his allies thought he was crazy. Today we're talking about one of the most controversial figures in American history, John Brown. His story isn't just about rebellion. It's a gripping tale of faith, violence, and a burning desire for justice that ultimately pushed a divided nation over the edge. John Brown was born in Connecticut in 1800 into a deeply religious family that fiercely opposed slavery. This wasn't just a political opinion for them, it was a matter of divine law. Brown grew up believing that slavery was a profound sin against God, and he felt a personal calling to destroy it. Unlike many abolitionists who favored peaceful protest and political change, Brown believed in a more direct, Old Testament approach. He saw himself as an instrument of God's wrath, chosen to smash the institution of slavery with force. For most of his life, Brown was a struggling businessman, moving from one failed venture to another. But his anti-slavery conviction never wavered. He was a key figure in the Underground Railroad, helping escaped slaves find their way to freedom in the North. But this wasn't enough. He grew increasingly frustrated with the slow pace of change. He felt that talk was cheap, and that only blood could wash away the sin of slavery. His radicalism exploded onto the national stage in the 1850s, in a territory that was a preview of the Civil War, Bleeding Kansas. The Kansas-Nebraska Act had declared that the settlers themselves would decide whether Kansas would be a free or slave state. This led to a violent rush from both pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions to populate and control the territory. John Brown and 5 of his sons went to Kansas to fight for the Free State cause. After pro-slavery forces sacked the abolitionist town of Lawrence, Brown decided it was time for retaliation. In May 1856, in what became known as the Pottawatomie Massacre, Brown and his followers dragged 5 pro-slavery settlers from their homes at night and brutally killed them with broadswords. This act of shocking violence horrified many on both sides and earned Brown a reputation as a dangerous fanatic. But for him, it was a necessary act of war. He believed he was striking terror into the hearts of the wicked. But Kansas was just a rehearsal for his ultimate plan. Brown spent the next few years secretly gathering money, weapons, and a small band of loyal followers. His goal was audacious, almost insane, to seize the federal armory at Harpers Ferry, Virginia. He planned to take its massive stockpile of weapons, arm the local slave population, and spark a massive slave rebellion that would spread like wildfire across the South, creating a new free state in the Appalachian Mountains. On the night of October 16, 1859, Brown and his 21 men, a mix of white abolitionists, free black men, and his own sons, launched their raid. Initially, they met with success, capturing the armory with little resistance. But then everything started to go wrong. The expected slave uprising never happened. Local militia and townspeople quickly surrounded them. Brown and his men were trapped inside the armory's engine house. The situation became a siege. Finally, a company of U.S. Marines, led by none other than Colonel Robert E. Lee, stormed the engine house. The fighting was quick and brutal. Most of Brown's men were killed, including 2 of his sons. Brown himself was severely wounded and captured. His raid was a military failure, but his trial was a resounding success for his cause. Brown, wounded but defiant, used the courtroom as his stage. He delivered powerful, eloquent speeches that were printed in newspapers across the country. He argued that his actions were guided by a higher law and the teachings of the Bible. He famously said, "I, John Brown, am now quite certain that the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away, but with blood." He was found guilty of treason, murder, and inciting a slave insurrection, and was sentenced to hang. On December 2, 1859, John Brown was executed. 2 Southerners, he was a terrorist who got what he deserved. They were terrified that more John Browns were lurking in the North, ready to invade and destroy their way of life. But in the North, public opinion was complex. While many condemned his violent methods, they admired his courage and his unwavering dedication to ending slavery. He was transformed into a martyr for the abolitionist cause. Thinkers like Ralph Waldo Emerson called him a new saint who would make the gallows as glorious as the cross. John Brown's raid on Harpers Ferry dramatically intensified the tensions between the North and South. It shattered any hope of a peaceful compromise. Less than 2 years after his execution, the Civil War began. And as Union soldiers marched into battle, they sang a new song. John Brown's body lies moldering in the grave, but his soul goes marching on. So, was John Brown a hero or a villain? A righteous martyr or a cold-blooded terrorist? His legacy is still debated today. But one thing is certain: this fiery, compromising man lit a fuse that helped ignite the bloodiest conflict in American history.